Well, hello class. Hope you all enjoyed the midterm exam as much as I am enjoying grading them. I've graded a few already, and most everyone so far did very well, so I'm happy about that. And there you go. And I will grade the remaining ones today and tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have them all done for you, so you can check out your grade. And meanwhile, welcome to week 8. This week we're discussing and studying water pollution. It's a topic that I have worked in a bit during my life, and we come back for just 1 week here, and then you guys go on spring break, and so I just want you to remember to make sure you pass by your idea for your field experience paper to me. A number of you have already done that, and I think I've approved everyone or had some comments about just some questions about some of the sites, but everyone seems to be picking out good sites to go visit. And again, just make sure there's a staff person there that you can interview and answer your 4 environmental questions. Remember, there should be about environmental aspects of the site. Also this week there's a quiz on chapter 20, so take quiz 20 this week and get that out of the way as well before spring break. And remember that when we come back, the end of that week that we come back is when your field experience paper is due. So if you haven't set something up, you need to do that really quickly now, and either do the visit this week or during spring break, or the very early part of next week, and get the paper in by that Sunday night when it's due. So please work on that. If you have any questions, please let me know as usual. Okay, looking at the text, water pollution. Starts out by talking about what are the causes and effects of water pollution. So you want to know the major causes of water pollution, and for that, and also what their impacts are. And so for that, I really want you to take a look on page 532 of the text, and they have 2 charts there, 2 tables, table 21 and 2. And so they talk about the major types of water pollution and their sources, and also common diseases that are transmitted through contaminated drinking water. Again, something that you and I may not have to worry about very much, unless maybe we go hiking out in the deep woods, or even in the not so deep woods. But that millions and millions, in fact, probably well over 1 billion at least people around the world do have to worry about on a daily basis as to whether that next drink of water is going to be the one that kills them or their children. So something definitely to be concerned about. So I want you to know those, those types of water pollution, and also, some of the problems that they can cause. Then the book goes into basically looking at the sources and effects of water pollution on our major sources of water. So it starts out with lakes and streams. So looking at things like the Great Lake, about the largest source of fresh water on the planet, which were very highly polluted in older days, and are still polluted, but have gotten a lot better over the decades. You think we'd want to protect our largest source of fresh water on the planet, but that just wasn't the case in the past. So look at streams and lakes, and there's a difference. If you pollute a stream, it has a different impact in terms of the length of its toxicity, let's say, as opposed to when you pollute a lake. Most of you probably can think about that. Lakes are pretty stagnant. I mean, they do have some sources coming into them, and maybe a source going out, but they don't turn over the volume of water very frequently at all, whereas the stream is moving, and so nature can cleanse itself over a certain period of time and length of a stream, unless we totally overwhelm it with the amount of pollution we've put in, which we have in the past. You may have heard of the famous Cuyahoga River in Ohio that caught fire in the 60s. There was so much pollution in it, and oily pollution, that the river actually caught fire. Now, you've got to ask yourself, we put water on fire to put it out. We use water to put fires out. So if the water's catching fire, something's really wrong. Some of you may know there's a Randy Newman song that I like that mentions the Cuyahoga River. That talks about how only God can make a river, but only man can make it burn. So anyway, another important thing to look at, and that's on page 534, is looking at the oxygen sag curve. And this is basically looks like how oxygen in the water, which is necessary for obviously fish and for plants, it goes down as we add certain pollutants to the water, and how eventually over time and distance the oxygen comes back up. So you dump in a load, a nutrient load, the oxygen gets used up, there may be less fish and some impacts there, but as you go down, a little bit of distance and some time, that oxygen level will eventually, come back if it's not totally overwhelmed. So please take a look at that as well. Then we get into, also a very important source of our water, which is groundwater. A lot of wells around the world, and a lot of people dependent on wells and tapping into aquifers underground to get their water supply. And you would think, again, we wouldn't be polluting these aquifers, but that also has not been the case. We have had major cases of polluted aquifers and many places around the world, and even in the United States, where people can't pump water any longer from wells because they're so contaminated. And you can imagine it's kind of really expensive and really difficult to clean water that's underground. You have to either put something down there, like sometimes there's bioremediation, where you put certain bacteria down there that can eat out some of the pollutants, or you pump it to the surface and clean it and pump it back down. But any of these activities are very expensive, and it would have obviously been a lot cheaper just not to pollute it in the first place, but it took us a long time to learn some of these things, if in fact we've learned them even now. So look at groundwater. A lot of you probably get your water from groundwater, as well as from some distant sources like reservoirs and so forth. And look at some of the the ways to prevent and also to clean up groundwater pollution. There's also a section in the book about is bottled water a solution to our problem? Is that a good option? And read about that, because I think that's very important. I find it kind of ridiculous that we bottle water, but gee whiz, if the marketing folks can convince us to buy water, then God, we are suckers. Unless you live in an area that has the worst tasting water, and even then you could put filters on your faucet and stuff like that are a lot less expensive. Just the amount of plastic bottles generated by bottled water is outrageous. And in many cases where we used to build water purification plants and help build them in developing and poorer countries, we now say, oh, wow, they can have bottled water, which really isn't the solution. And maybe we're not building those plants to help them have clean water. So, again, that's a major issue, is the water we get from under the ground, and then also, what we do with it in terms of drinking it or bottling it. Okay, next are the oceans. This is obviously the largest bodies of water on the planet. We can't drink it as it naturally is with its salty content, but we certainly can pollute it. And what have we done? As you might guess, where the worst pollution occurred? The worst pollution has occurred where the most important ecological areas of the oceans are, and those are the areas close to the shore. Going from the wetlands out to the near shore, where most of the life in the ocean is not very much in the middle of the Pacific, in the deep ocean, though there's obviously life there, but most of it is along the coast, and that's where most of the population of the planet lives, along the coasts of all the countries. So again, you'd think, well, we're living there, we shouldn't dirty our own area, but again, we have not been good at doing that, and we've had anything from raw sewage and all the factory waste and anything else we can think of, runoff from all the cities when it rains, bringing antifreeze and tire waste and gasoline and anything else, oil that pours on the ground, you know, putting that into the streams that lead to the ocean as well. You know, read about the pollution of the oceans and some things we can do to help prevent that as well. Also, there's a question, we've discussed it a little bit, but also the quote dead spot in the Gulf of Mexico. Not really dead. I mean, there is life there, but because of nutrients going down the Mississippi, mainly from agricultural sources, we have a lack of oxygen that lowers the amount of life that's in a large area of the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a whole science focus in your book on that, so please take a look at that as well. Interesting how, you know, just the waste from many, many small places can impact such a large area like the Gulf of Mexico. And so remember, when you're looking at types of pollution, there's point pollution of water pollution, there's non-point. And point is when you can look at a specific, like a pipe coming out of a factory, or, you know, the output from a sewage treatment plant. And that's a single point. And then, you know, these point sources are easy to identify. There's a pipe there. They're also easier to control. There's a pipe there. You can put controls on that. You can put filters and other things like that. But most of our point sources have been fairly well controlled in this country, at least, and in most of the developed countries. It's the non-point sources, the small things we do, the runoff from city streets, the individual runoff from farms, from the terrible over-irrigation we do in many cases, where it washes off agricultural chemicals and pesticides and fertilizers into the water. You know, all these small ones, millions of these small sources all around, these non-point sources, much harder to control. How do you control that? So you should know that difference between point and non-point. Then it talks about how we can best deal with water pollution, and we talk about some of the laws. Of course, the biggest one being the Clean Water Act, which was passed in 1972. To show you how much, you know, times have changed, you know, the first Earth Day, which I helped organize back in 1970, and most of all the major pieces of environmental legislation on the federal level were all passed in the very late 60s and mainly in 1970 and the 72 and 73. And who was president then? Can you remember? Yeah, it was good old Richard Nixon, a Republican. And so you can see how the times have changed now, where we have now the Republicans trying to, and some Democrats too, I must admit, it doesn't go just by party lines, but trying to close down the Environmental Protection Agency, to do away with our clean water and clean air laws because of their supposed impact on industry. And there is, you have to remember, there's a cost benefit to everything. There is some cost. If industry is going to control pollution, there is a cost to that. And that cost is most likely being passed on to you and I as consumers with the higher price of goods. And so you have to say, as a society, are we willing to pay that price? I certainly do not want to go back to how dirty the air was, especially in Los Angeles and areas of California back in the 60s and 70s. I don't want to go back to seeing just the most horrendous water pollution along a river that I grew up on, the Hudson River in New York State. Areas where they were basically totally dead, as parts of the Great Lakes were. We've made a lot of progress in water pollution. It's one of our best success stories. And to turn back those laws now, I just think would be a terribly short-sighted mistake that we make. There is an economic benefit to a clean environment. And in fact, some studies have shown that actually those states that have tougher environmental laws actually have better economies as well. And certainly better quality of living. Why does everybody come to California? Okay, because it's Hollywood. But anyway, taking advantage of the natural resources an area has is an economic factor as well. And so we should protect those, I think. So, how should we best deal with water pollution? The best, as always, with any kind of pollution, is prevention. And if you can prevent it in the first place, that's great. In other words, can we change the way we do things? Can industry change the way they make products? Or that they control the water pollution leaving their sites so we have, we just produce less in the first place. One of the largest sources of water pollution years ago was you and I, were our toilets, our sewage. In many cases, when you flushed the toilet years ago, it went straight into the local river. We used to have millions of people flushing their toilet in Manhattan and New York City, and it went straight into the river there. The East River or the Hudson River. Not a really good thing, especially if you wanted to go swimming that day. And so one of the things that the Clean Water Act did, as well as some other legislation, is it gave millions and billions of dollars to local towns and cities to build sewage treatment plants. And you're going to study sewage treatment in the book, and I want you to learn that process, how it works, as primary, secondary, and tertiary sewage treatment. Most places now should have tertiary, especially if they're in a sensitive area, like let's say around Lake Tahoe, or even going into the areas that go into the San Francisco Bay, like San Jose. And so I want you to study those and know how a sewage treatment plant works. It's good to know what happens when you flush the toilet, where it's going, what happens to it. You may not want to read that section, right before or after lunch. Okay. So know a little bit about the laws, know a little about sewage treatment and how that works. I've lived in rural areas. We own a farm in upstate New York still. And so I've lived on areas that have septic tanks. Some of you may have lived in areas that have septic tanks. If you've only lived in the city, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but you'll read about it in the book. And those are a joy to deal with, and especially like when the one in New York State froze when we were away at an environmental conference and everything. Okay, that's most of the major parts of the water pollution chapter. When I was teaching in the classroom in San Jose State, I also worked for the city of San Jose, and I supervised about 16 of the water pollution inspectors. And we pretty much worked on non-point sources. We inspected auto body shops and every kind of real made, for the most part, small industries and shopkeepers. I mean, you really weren't even allowed to hose down the sidewalk. It was basically against the rules because of washing all the dirt and stuff into the sewers that would then empty into the rivers and streams that would empty into the bay and so forth. So it was a very interesting job there, and in the past, like I said, I was also director of Friends of the River, so I ran an environmental organization that was trying to save the rivers from being dammed and polluted in California, and that group still lives and works on. So, okay, so we wrap up our discussion of water pollution. I want to show you I got my my birthday present, which is next month in April. In fact, it's almost a month from today. And I got my birthday present early because it's the new iPad. Yes, you can see. Here we go. Ta-da! Anyway, it's the first time I've sort of jumped in at the to be a first adopter of a new technology. I usually wait, but since this is the third version and the fourth version will be out next week, and by next month I'll be on version 7 from Apple, I decided that would be nice. And besides, as a birthday present, how can I turn it down? So I am really enjoying my new gift and going mobile, as who once said. Before your time, I know. Anyway. So, remember a couple things. Take the quiz. Make sure you pass by your idea for the field experience paper. Make sure you have an idea for a field experience paper. Make sure you have a site set up where you can go and be interviewed. Where you can go interview them and you can tour the site. Remember, I need the name and the title of the person that you interview. And also, I want you to, prepare now for spring break. So put that book down, pick up a beer. Put that glass down and pick up a book and study hard. And all of you be safe over spring break week, and all of you return happy and healthy and and ready to finish up this class. We're all doing really well, and so I'm very pleased. And so that'll be it for this week. Take care. Bye-bye.